It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Monday, May 29th, and so happy for you joining us, and we are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So what is happening today on this exciting podcast? We have 2G Talks with Eddie Kwan, the Sunday Message Word Study, and of course, commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. All right, everyone, how are you doing, and how was your weekend? Yes, I'm sure you guys enjoyed, relaxed, had a lot of different things going on, and I'm sure some of you also had maybe a pretty rough or tough weekend too. We all have those types of days here and there, but I'm glad you made it all the way to Monday, and it's another week we can do it together with the Lord with this week's Sunday message, and a great one, another awesome one. I really, really enjoyed it. It's don't listen to the words of people whose words cause rot like yeast, and hear the word and understand the meaning of the one who spoke. So I think it's a very deep meaning that we have to think about, and we'll go more over that in the Sunday message, right? So it's Monday, and it's not just any Monday, it's not just any week, it is kind of like Alpha Week, I guess, because is it this Thursday? I think this Thursday or Friday. Yeah, Thursday, I believe, is June 1st, right? It's the middle of the year. It is Alpha Day when this history began, when Sunstein began to preach. So I'm excited about this too. And, it's kind of what Sunstein was talking about before is we got to share our stories. But when it comes to Alpha Day, we need to know, right, that how important Alpha Day is. It's the beginning of this history. We should know how it began. We should know the stories. It's very interesting when you think about Alpha Day because when it comes to the history of God, sometimes we have this wrong notion that Alpha Day begins. The history started in Jubilee and celebration. But when you know the story of Alpha Day, it was quite sad, right? It was difficult, right? It was a path of difficulty. No one waiting for him at the train station. He was basically alone and sleeping in the mountains once again. So it's almost like, imagine training in the mountains for 21 years and all the conditions are set. Then you're ready to go out for Alpha Day. And then 1 week before, you're praying in the mountains in Mount Pebang. And there's snakes and stuff coming to get you, but you're praying so hard and the snakes can't get you. And you're like, all right, it's done. Let's go to Seoul. And when he goes to Seoul, it's kind of like, things should be kind of different, shouldn't they? Right? And that's kind of an expectation we have too, is like when God says, it has begun, then we're going to be like, yes, it's going to be so awesome and so great. But when he gets there, there's no one waiting for him. There's nothing prepared. And his life isn't any different than before. It's just as hard as he's being rejected for 3 years. And he's living in the mountains again. Right? So when you think about the beginning of this path, it wasn't an easy path. It was the beginning of a path, right? And when you really think about what we learn in this history and on how God does things, the biggest part comes at the end. It never comes at the beginning, right? It just never comes at the beginning. Like, how great is Christianity today? It's so great right now, but at the beginning, it started off so small. Persecution, people against them, fighting inside the early Christian church. It wasn't easy. It was the beginning of a path, right? The path begins for something that's greater in the future. And I think it's something that we also have to learn in life. Right? The beginning is exciting because you started, right? Just starting towards something greater, right? But you realize in life that it takes time, it takes effort, and, we will misunderstand God sometimes because we think that, God is with us, so it's going to start off really, really well. It's not going to be like that. The celebrations are always at the end, not the beginning. The end point is where, that's why there's a proverb that the end is strong, right? Because that's when everything is finally fulfilled. It even took 37 years? Because it was 2015. Yeah, 37 years is when the rapture happened and when everything was complete. But then here's the crazy part is we're like, rapture! But it was the beginning of the rapture. So that's complete and a new stage began. And everyone thought that things would be so much better, and all of a sudden things would like change in an instant. There'd be fanfare to start this rapture history. And if you think about it, even when you look at Jesus' story becomes amazing, even more amazing after everything is done. Like salvation has been complete. We're like, oh my gosh, it's all worked out. And then we look at that sad story on the cross and we celebrate it, right? But imagine if you're in process or you're at the beginning, it's very hard to celebrate. When everything is done, very easy to celebrate and very, very easy to say, oh, it was worth it. But if you're in the process going through all that suffering, it's not easy, right? And that's why this week of Alpha, this Alpha week, right now would be the time from last Friday until Alpha Day, until January 1st, would be the time where Sunsee's spending that time praying for a week before he goes out. And it wasn't an easy time, but I think it's a good lesson for all of us to think about too, is anything special, anything meaningful, anything great does not start out like that. It's something that takes a lot of time, right? So I hope it's something that we can learn by thinking about Alpha Week. And it's much easier to celebrate now because we've gone through 45 years of history. But of course, we're going through difficulties right now. So a lot of times people are going to be thinking more deeply about Alpha Day also. But I think it is. It's something that we do need to think about much more deeply about how life is, how history is made, right? So for me on my weekend, I spent most of my time with my parents because my dad's birthday and stuff. And very eventful to say the least. Spending a lot of time with my parents is very interesting because they say some funny and some deep things at the same time, right? Funny stuff, deep stuff, everything. So like my mom was telling me yesterday, on Saturday, we were eating lunch for my dad's birthday. And then we went to go buy him a birthday present and stuff. But as we're eating lunch, my mom was like, what my mom does is almost every night, she watches Korean dramas and shows, Korean shows, late into the night, like past midnight. And, I usually try to sleep a lot earlier. I usually try to sleep earlier than that, but, it's been kind of hot in the house lately because we're on the second floor, so all the heat rises. So I do leave my door open because I'm like, I got to get the air to circulate from the outside to cool off my room. And when my mom came up, she passed my room, but my door was open and she looks in just to see, well, I'm sleeping, right? She looks in. And then when she looks in, she said she said that I let out like 2 or 3 monster farts. And then she just laughed by herself. And then she went to bed. But she told me the other day, she's like, by herself, she's just sitting there laughing at the front door because she's hearing me farting in my sleep. Which does come back to the thing we talked about last week when I talked about all those fart stories. 13 to 21 times a day is how much people fart. And a lot of it is done while you're sleeping, right? So there you go. Testament to what I'm saying is quite true, as my mom has heard me farting a couple times at night. I don't even know why I'm talking about farts again. No, it's because my mom brought it up. But later, actually, on the way to lunch, she actually said something very deep to me, right? And she's talking about her friends. And remember, my mom is 71. My dad just turned 76 on Sunday, right? And she was telling me stuff like, a lot of her friends are sick. Like sick as in, not like sick, but like, they went through some really bad health scares. 2 of the friends, one of them I've known all my life. I just saw them on Saturday too. We went. He had a stroke, so his left side of his body doesn't work very well. Right. Two of her good friends had a stroke. Another 2, which is a couple, both of them have Alzheimer's. Can't even recognize their children. They don't even recognize each other as married. Right. A lot of them have arthritis, and like a lot of these different health issues. And my mom turns to me and says, you and your brother are so lucky. And I'm like, oh, why? He's like, well, because me and your dad are so healthy. We're still healthy. We don't have any of these issues or problems. But then she said, and this is kind of like, it kind of stung too. She's like, and that's probably why you guys don't contact us that much. Right? And I was like, oh, that's an interesting thing to say. And she's like, yeah, because since my friends are sick, Alzheimer's, strokes, and all these other different things, their children visit them and call them all the time. Right? And he's like, you guys are lucky because you don't have to check in with us because we're healthy. And in my head, I was like, shots fired. They're like, yeah, but it's true, right? It's like when they're sick, when you know that they're not going to be here that much longer, when you know it's their last years on earth, this is when we're kind of like, oh, hey, mama, how are you? And you want to spend that time because you realize at that moment how, the value of your parents, and you have to take care of them and you have to be with them a lot too. But the way she said it was very interesting because I had two things in my mind. The first thing was, man, I am so thankful. I'm so grateful to God that my parents are healthy. Like, I'm so grateful. Like, I really thought about that. It's like, wow, that's so true. They are healthy, and a lot of people at their age of 76 and 71 are going through a lot of health scares, health issues, dementia, Alzheimer's, having strokes, all these are different things. But both my parents are healthy. Like the latest thing my dad did, on his right eye, he had cataract surgery. And that's why for his birthday, if you saw my Instagram, I bought him sunglasses. So, because he needs it for his eyes, right? And then, polarized UV, all UVA, UVB, all those other different things. Because, that's what they, that's important, right? For my dad's health. So, I was so thankful for that. But then the second part was, it's like, wow, I really need to value while they're healthy, which makes a lot more sense because when they're not healthy, you can't do anything together. And that's why, and for me, as I was like, yeah, but that made me even more thankful to have that trip in Southeast Asia with them for 3-4 weeks, right? Just hanging out, going country to country, spending a lot of time together. And that's something that I was very, very thankful for. And I'm hoping that, I'm really, really hoping that, I can, use this time well here with my family too. Like, like I said, it was my dad's birthday. Went out and I bought him the sunglasses. And I was, and for me, it is very interesting to see how my dad functions in his head because he's changed a lot after he's gotten a lot older. But, me and my mom were just like, he can't be wearing those $10 7-Eleven glasses, right? And they look so tacky. They're like sports style fake Oakley style sunglasses and stuff, but they're not polarized. They're not UVA, UVB protected and stuff like that too. So we were like, his eyes are really important. So we got him that stuff, but I'm super, and it's interesting because he's reached the age, like even when he's getting sunglasses, he doesn't care what it looks like. The whole time he's asking us, what do you think? Which one's better? I was like, I like these ones better. Okay, I'll get this one. And my mom was like, I like this one. Okay, I'll get this one. All he cares about is function. Right? And, it's like, I think that's what happens when you get older. Like, that's why he wears his pants above his belly button. I'm not sure why that you'd have to do that anyways. And of course, he has the worst dad jokes where he tells jokes and he just laughs by himself. But, I think it happens when you get older, you realize what is most important, right? And I think the functionality matters more than what it looks like or how you look. And I think that's a big difference when it comes to getting older and wiser. As you gain age and experience, you realize what is most important in life, and for them it's all health, right? Being able to go out on vacation, hanging out, like that's something that they're very, very, very into. And I looked at that, I was like, yeah, and I think even for myself, as I've gotten older, I'm in my 40s now, there's a lot of things that I really don't care about either. Like even the way I dress, I'm more about comfort rather than looking good. Like I do, I'm not saying that I dress like trash, right? I'm just saying that I would rather be comfortable, and just be clean, wear clean, be very clean in my clothes, rather than just going out and rather than looking really, really, really nice. And of course, eventually you want to find a nice median where you're not looking like trash, but you're comfortable at the same time too. But I think that comes with age and such, and we're going to realize a lot more what is the most important things in life. And eventually we're going to realize is a lot of it's going to have to do with your health, both physically and spiritually and mentally. Right? More than all the other things that we think about right now. And I think younger people may not get it because, that image and the way that we look at ourselves is very, very important. But yeah, I had a good weekend and I had a lot of good, deeper thoughts. Oh, I had this crazy thing that happened. Okay, well, not crazy, but I went to a bubble tea shop. It was like after lunch with my parents, with my dad's birthday, we went out and everything else, and then we came back home around like 6 p.m., something along that line. And I was just like, I gotta get out, right? I'm gonna do something. I gotta do something. I'm doing some work, and I went to a bubble tea shop, and I found a place that closed at 11 p.m. So I want to go somewhere where I could just sit there and work, right? So and those of you guys don't know, and I think that this is something that's more predominantly with males, right? But we're really, really able to get hyper focused on something, right? And so for me, I am super hyper focused on the like AI and doing projects on AI and stuff like that too. And I've been so into it and doing things and just spending hours and hours on it. And, it's kind of like before I was into crypto, right? When I was into crypto, I was super focused onto it, right? And you kind of just do it religiously. So I went to this bubble tea place. And for me, I've never been so annoyed. Like the table right next to me. This is a group of people, these Asian people. Okay? It's not about Asians though. But there was this girl, and this is not about girls either, but this is like, there's this girl there. She was talking so loud, like so loud. And you can hear everything. It's like, I'm a recruiter, and no, you shouldn't do that. And you should do, and it was just like, so obnoxious. And I was so annoyed. And I was thinking to myself, like, why am I annoyed? Right? Why am I annoyed? And if I were to be super honest, I think I was most annoyed by the pitch of her voice. Like, when it's really high and it's like piercing your ears, and on top of it, she's speaking really loud, and it was just not a pleasant voice to hear, like that high pitch. And the fact that it was so loud and I heard every part of her conversation, and she's like cutting in and saying, I was just like, oh. And I was kind of like shaking my head like, oh my gosh, I am so annoyed. I put it this way, guys. I put in my my AirPods with noise canceling, and I was still annoyed. Still annoyed, right? So I'm not sure if you guys have experienced this too, but just loud and obnoxious. And I'm just like, but for me, I think it was the high pitch. So I started, to look into some research. I'm like, is it really because of the pitch? And I was looking at some American studies, like these researches that were conducted across like 26 countries about the pitches of voices and who people trust more, or who people will believe in more. And like these 26 countries over 6 continents did this study. And it was from like Cornell University, which is one of the Ivy League schools. And the studies show that older individuals generally are perceived as wiser than younger individuals, right? And then there was another study from the College of Massachusetts and showed that speakers with older sounding voices are perceived as wiser than those with younger sounding voices. And older and wiser sounding voices are lower and deeper. So what came out of this study is high-pitched voices are considered younger, which also makes people think that they are less wise because they're younger, less experienced in life, right? So when it comes to like leadership and picking someone to lead, people prefer lower pitches. And in this study, it was very interesting. They picked all these presidential candidates and they changed the pitches of the voices to listen to, and they're asking them, which one do you like better? It's like 70% in these countries prefer the lower pitched voices, right? So people prefer lower pitches, especially when it comes to areas of leadership and competence, right? And so, I was like, oh, maybe that makes a little bit more sense, because if it has to do with competence, like just, kind of this innate thing that we think that lower pitch voices sound more, now I'm trying to speak a little bit more deeper and lower so you guys can trust my voice, right? So, it's like, if the pitch is lower, then people are more likely to vote for them as a leader because they think they're wiser and more experienced, and they probably know better too. So I was just like, oh, that's quite interesting. Like, I think it's something that we should think about too, is don't just like say, well, I don't like that. But then you got to kind of research like, oh, why don't I like that? And when you figure out something, it's like, wow, sometimes that's just do with the pitch. And sometimes people, want the lower pitch, right? And that's just kind of innate. Both guys and girls are like 65 to 70% are choosing to have the lower pitch than the higher pitch as a more trusting person. right? So finally, that annoying girl left. And then these two high school girls came in. And for me, at beginning, I was kind of like, because this one girl there was just talking it was like 2 hours of talking. But I thought eventually it was hilarious. It was hilarious. I don't know if it's just me getting old, but being annoyed by everything at first, but it was hilarious when I was listening to her content because she's right there and she's pretty loud too. So there's one girl, and there's only one girl talking the entire time. Never stopped. I don't think she even breathed for like 2 hours. Like I was listening to the conversation, just laughing inside my head, right? She was like, so, oh my God, so I just went through this crazy time with this guy, and we're like stuck in some group thing, and I went to, and since I went alone, my partner was this other guy, and we really hit it off so well, and he asked me do you have a boyfriend? And I said like, yeah, well, actually, he's not like my real boyfriend, but we're kind of like dating. Well, not dating, more like seeing each other. And then the guy was like really chill about it. So we exchanged IGs, and then he would comment on my IG, even when he sees me with my boyfriend. Well, not my boyfriend, but the other guy I'm seeing. And then this is the whole time, and it's going on for 2 hours straight. I swear she wasn't breathing. And at first I was like, ugh, what's she babbling about, right? I was just like, I'll hear, and I was just kind of like, ugh, I'm so annoyed. But then I was listening to it, I was like, oh, this is hilarious. And then it just reminded me of high school. And even like, in high school when I talked to girls, they would just keep talking. And I would just listen and just make grunting noises to show them I'm still alive, like right? And I'm just like, wow, like it just it just reminded me of my high school days. I was just laughing. I was laughing inside, like, wow. I didn't really think that people would talk, you see in the movies like, what's that? Clueless, right? Like whatever, like the Valley Girl. But I think the West Coast has that type of vibe. I'm not sure about you guys. I think the West Coast has that type of vibe. Either way. That's kind of what my weekend was like. What was your weekend like, guys? Anything cool, funny happen like that? Yeah, probably not, right? I don't know. For me, because I have this podcast, it's really interesting. I'm very perceptive of what's happening around me, and all the little things I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that on my podcast. Oh, I want to talk about this on my podcast. So, that's kind of like, for me, that's what I think about a lot, is all the different experiences, the funny things, the deep things people say. I listen to it, I'm like, oh, that's something I should talk about too on my podcast. But it's kind of like you guys are my friends, and I'm that girl babbling for like an hour, and you guys are listening and laughing along, or whatever it is. Maybe that's, maybe this is my tool to vent, or to let out all the different things I'm talking about, because I don't really have a lot of people that I like go out and hang out with. Either way. Oh, I listened to a podcast the other day. It's a podcast for pro athletes, and they're talking about the little beefs that a lot of athletes go through and stuff, and people like calling each other's names and stuff like that. And this one person said something really deep, and I thought it was like it's a proverb itself. And he said that when they're talking about pro athletes talking bad about other pro athletes, and the guy said, "Hurt people hurt others. Hurt people hurt others." And I was like, whoa, and that really hit me, because it really made me think about the times when I was going through difficult times, or someone hurt me, and then the things that I would start saying about others, or the blame I put on others, right, when I was going through hurt, right? And I think it's something, it makes a lot of sense, right? And here's the interesting thing. This week's Sunday message, one of the points I will talk about a little later in the next segment, is when Sunsteem said, like, if you think this message is about other people and not yourself, then you're on track to become like the Pharisees and Sadducees. You're always blaming other people when you should be thinking about yourself first, right? And, that's why when I heard this proverb of, hurt people hurt others, I was like, oh, that's really, really interesting, because when you hear hurt people hurt others, we're probably thinking like, oh, this person said this nasty thing and this person said, and we're not thinking about ourselves. But I do think it's something that we have to think about ourselves, that, yeah, we're doing the same thing where when we get hurt, we're hurting other people also, right? And this is why, like, haven't you guys heard this excuse before? And no, not well, it's kind of an excuse, but people will say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm going through some tough things right now." But they've just, they've basically laid waste on people, and then they'll, at the end of it, they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I've just been going through a rough time." And then we understand. Why do we understand them? We understand them because us too, when we go through a really, really difficult time, we're hurting other people too. We make mistakes. And this is why we also say things like, oh man, this person's going through a hard time. We got to kind of understand them a little bit more, or whatever it is. But when I looked at that, I was like going, wow, it's kind of like we already know this, that hurt people hurt others. Because when people say I'm going through a hard time, we kind of understand them more. And I think that's something that we have to look at ourselves also is, hey, when you're getting hurt, the thing you have to watch out for is that you stop hurting other people during that time. And this is when we become true people of integrity, true people of God, where no matter what we're going through, we're not hurting other people. No matter what we go through, we're not putting blame or stuff onto others, but we're always looking inwards towards ourselves. Right? So that's something that I was thinking about, and I think I wanted to share that with you guys from this podcast I heard, but it really made me think a lot about this week's Sunday message too, that we have to start thinking about it for ourselves more than, oh, this person's like this because, oh, maybe they're hurt. So no, the answer is, what happens when you're hurt? What do you do? Right? So yeah, that's a bunch of the things that I've been thinking about and the stuff I went through over the weekend. Hope you guys had a great weekend too. Just want to let you guys know that, we are... I'm just so happy about this podcast because we are pushing strong with so many different segments throughout the week, from the Man Cave that comes out today, and then we have Love and Life tomorrow. We have Provipuff Girls on Thursday, and then Friday we have the prayer podcast. We got like poems, and we got all these other different things, and Provicom coming out on Saturdays. So that's something I really hope that all of us can really get ourselves, not get ourselves, but I think this is something that we are turning into a real platform for English-speaking members from around the world. And I hope you guys are really enjoying it. And I'm so thankful that you guys are commenting. And if like I always say every Monday, if you guys are inspired, go ahead and join us on Patreon and support us financially. We're always looking forward to it. If you guys are doing that, if you are inspired by the Holy Spirit, go ahead and join us. We definitely are needing your support each and every day. So everyone, I hope that you guys are enjoying all the different programs that are happening right now. All right. Either way, so let's then get into our first break.
Please don't let me down, Lord. I know I can trust you with all my heart. So I'm on my knees praying for you to always come through. Even if I pray all night, all I want is for your will be done. So I'm on my knees praying for you to always come through. No, I'm not slipping through. No, I'm not falling down. The only thing that's falling is my knees on the floor. I'm praying, Lord, will you give me strength? Lord, will you give me power? I can't do this myself, so bless me in the morning hours. All the demons test me, but they will never shake me. If I pray, they hate me. If I pray, you love me. Connected with you is the only thing that matters. And honestly, I couldn't be happier. While I'm praying on my knees, I trust you with all my heart. For you always come through. For myself, for my family, for myself alone I pray. Please don't let me down, Lord. I know I can trust you with all my heart. So I'm on my knees praying for you to always come through. Even if I pray all night, all I want is for your will be on my knees, praying for you to always come through. I pray to never just settle for good when great is available. Who's the mastermind behind this mind? I give all the credit to God, that's why I'm back. They mad that I made it, I know that the Satans, they hate it. I keep working hard just to make progress. Now I'm on 10, trust the process, ayy. Look at my efforts lately, I'm setting conditions daily. I'm praying on my knees, so bless me. Please bless me, please bless me. Tribulations always come and go, I will never stop, just always know your focus determines reality, stay solid, that's why I'm praying on my knees. I trust you with all my heart, for you to always come through. For myself, for my family, on myself alone I pray. Please don't let me down, Lord. I know I can trust you with all my heart, so I'm on my knees, praying for you to always come through. Even if I pray all night, all I want is for your will be done. So I'm on my knees, praying for you to always come through. SB.
All right, so let's get into today's second segment, which is the word study on the Sunday message, which we do every single Monday. And I know a lot of you guys are enjoying this too, going deeper into the words and kind of bringing up new questions that would make us think of the word in a different way. And this week's Sunday message comes from Matthew chapter 16, verse 5 through 12. I really, really like these verses, especially when it comes to the bread of life, right? It says, don't listen to the word, this week's Sunday message title, don't listen to the words of people whose words cause rot like yeast. Hear the word and understand the meaning of the one who spoke. Okay, so I like the introduction for the message because it went straight into yeast. Like, what is yeast? I'm not sure if there's an intro that is only from the leader that I listen to, but I like it when there's a parable and you go into the physical, like finding out the things about the physical parable to understand why it was used spiritually, right? So Jesus is like, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees, right? And the leader I was listening to went straight into what is yeast, right? Talking about like yeast is like a fungus, kind of like mushrooms, right? And or mold, right? So it is a fungi, okay? And but obviously Jesus in this message is talking more about a baker's yeast, right? And it basically causes bread to rise. And it does this through fermentation, and it makes it more fluffy. And if you guys know what fermentation is actually a rotting process, right? And which is quite interesting that we're rotting the bread to make it taste better, kind of thing, right? And but it also plays into what Jesus is talking about. Don't use the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees, right? Because that is a different type of rotting. Okay, so in Israel, yeast is also another word for yeast is like leaven. Right? That's why you'll always hear in the Old Testament unleavened bread, leavened bread, right? So bakers in those times of Israel would add leaven to their bread, and it becomes more fluffy. And of course, you have unleavened bread, which is flat. And Jews eat unleavened bread for certain holidays like Passover and other times like this. So Jesus uses this parable of the yeast. And when he starts telling the disciples, hey, guess what? Don't watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. The disciples have no idea what's going on. They have no idea. They're just kind of like, what? Right? They're like, oh, did we forget our physical bread, like actual real bread? And Jesus, you can tell that Jesus was quite frustrated with them at that point. Right? And what Jesus was talking about is, hey, there's a yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees that don't cause it to become like, the fermentation is not something that causes the bread to be better. It causes the bread to rot instead, right? And one of the big things that Jesus talked about is like, hey, Pharisees, Sadducees, the problem with them is when they preach the words of God, sometimes they'll add their own words or they'll change the word, right? And this causes the words to rot people instead, right? And this is something that I think is a very, very good thing that we have to think about also is how many times do we change the word so it fits our agenda? It fits what we want to do. You know what I mean? right? How many times have we said about the word, like, well, does it really mean this? Does it really mean we can't, like, do this and do that? Doesn't it just say this? And we kind of put our own twist to it so that we can feel good about doing the things that we do without feeling that bad, right? And I think that's something that we have to look at and take an honest reflection of ourselves. How much of the word are we adjusting with our own thoughts and our own perceptions, which usually comes from a certain goal or thing that we want from it, right? Like if you look at, a great example that the pastor gave was Genesis 2:17 is don't eat the fruit, but then Satan says, "Oh, come on, you're really going to die?" And of course, he's kind of changed it to physically, you're not physically going to die kind of thing, right? And when you think about it, it's like, yeah, it's kind of how even Satan twists the word so it fits his agenda of what he wants to get done. And a lot of times, like, remember we talked about this last week or the week before, we talked about difficult tribulations, extreme tribulations illuminates your motivation, right? And think about it too, even with ourselves, our motivation is what's going to cause us to change the word. Like if it's something you really, really want more. Like, one of the things that a lot of people, it's like, oh, well, sometimes people will say things like, oh, I don't like her. I just want to talk to her. But that's what guys in the world say when they really, really like the girl and they want to be with this person, but they're going to say stuff like, no, we're just friends. And, most of the guys are just like, no way. No one is just friends with someone who looks like that. No one treats a just friend like that kind of thing. But they're like, no, we're just friends. No, we just talk here and there, and I really help her out. A lot of times it's just like, now. And people twist their words, but they have their own motives and their own goals, right? And what happens is those motives that we have cause us to put our own perception and thoughts into the word that causes us to eventually go against God. Right? Like one of the points was talking about yeast is yeast itself is microscopic. You cannot see it with your naked eye, which is true too. Is when you listen to corrupt teachings, it's very difficult to detect because it's very small and tiny. You just think like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, of course, that sounds good too. Right? And that's why when you think about this, what is the only safeguard? The only safeguard would be like at the time of Jesus, the safeguard would be to only listen to Jesus and not to the Pharisees and Sadducees, right? And that's something that we have to think about is like, yeah, in that time, you would be the person that would only listen to Jesus and no one else, right? And it's Satan that wants to take us off the path. Right? It is Satan that, that kind of skews our thoughts and the way that we think. But we have to be those that have to understand, this part of the message this week. And I really, really enjoyed it and it really inspired me too, right? We have to hear the word properly, right? Because only when you hear it properly, only when it's heard without those extra thoughts, extra words, extra perception, this is when we're able to realize deeply, act on the message deeply, right? This is when our faith won't rot. This is when we're not going to get tempted. This is when we become rock solid in faith and we become united with the Holy Trinity and with Jesus. And that's something that I think that all of us too have to realize to that level. We have to be on guard. This is the message this week. Be on guard. The Pharisees, Sadducees, right? Those people of that time period, it's in this time period too. If you keep learning from those whose faith are corrupted or shallow in faith, immediately your faith begins to rot. Why? Because the yeast comes into your heart and you can't see it because it's microscopic and it begins to rot your heart. And that's the message for this week. That's the big thing. Be on guard. Be on guard, right? And if we're the one, think about this, when we say slander, some people say, well, I'm not slandering Sunseam. No, if you're slandering other people too, if you're talking behind other people's backs and saying these bad things, then you have already started to rot. Already your thoughts, already your heart is starting to rot. And when you eventually rot too much, you're rejected, you're turned away. Right? And this is why we have to be on guards with, we have to be able to, like, even for me, one of the ways you can tell if you're talking to someone who has rotting faith, Now, I know it sounds really, really bad, like, oh man, you got rotting faith, but we're going to go in terms, we're using the terminology from this week's message, right? If you have someone with rotting faith, one of the things that I see that is a big telltale sign is if they have lost their morals and ethics. Like, I look at that as a big sign, right? Like the things in Providence, yeah, no one is forced us to do anything here, right? And all like the stuff that I see that is really, really good in Providence, like when I see people who kind of veer off, they completely go everything against it. They'll do everything against it. They'll go completely so far off, right, that they have no more morals. They've lost their morals and ethics. Like, is it bad to be a good and kind person? And the answer is no way. But if you go so far off and you're starting to be unkind to people, talking bad about them, cursing and doing the stuff when you never did it before, this is when you see there's some type of rotting there, right? Because what's rotting is even the good stuff is rotting. Like, if you don't agree with Providence, fine. That's fine. But if you lose your morals and ethics and start doing things in terrible ways, right? You start conniving and start doing deceitful things, that's a sign that something's rotting, right? If someone starts saying all these bad things about people and some of the stuff you know not to be true, there's a sign there. Like, why would you say that? Why would you talk about someone like this? Right? Like, there's even one person I was so shocked by. Because this is like a year and a half ago, and you could already tell something was wrong. Like, I would meet with them for lunch, and then they would say to me, talk about someone else in Providence and say, I effing hate that person. For me, that's a rotting of ethics and morals. That's what the world does. There's no moral compass. But if you don't agree with Providence, but you still keep the kindness, you still keep the level head, you're not there slandering other people, you're not there saying other people's names and saying, oh, this person's just doing this because of this person, like, for me, is like, that's a good sign that, hey, this person's got their head still on their shoulders, they're still a good person. But if they lose their morals and ethics, you know, like, when the yeast comes in, it doesn't rot just the bad stuff. It rots the good stuff too. And that's why there's some things when I've been noticing even more is you'll see signs. There's signs there. When something is rotting inside, it's becoming bad. So when you look at it, people's hearts, when they begin to take in the rotting words, their hearts begin to change. And they become like the teachers of the law. They not only rot themselves, but they begin to rot other people and even kill them spiritually. So this is the message this week's really, really deep, right? So we have to understand what we've heard until this point, right? Don't you think it's kind of weird where people would confess with their lips and say how great the word is good, the word is good, the word is good. Oh, I love the word, I love the word. And then out of nowhere, they'll like, oh, I hate the word. It's always been wrong. I'm like, well, you never said that like 3 years ago. Well, what was the sudden change? What made you change? And, you know, they'll just, oh, they're lying. They're this. Like, and for me, I'm just like, there's a big shift somewhere. So that's why I love this week's message. It kind of gives you an idea of how things happen, how people change, right? People change either for the good or for the worse. People change in one way or the other. And, you know, when you look at when Jesus was talking to his disciples and, you know, they just couldn't realize what Jesus did at the time of the feeding of the 4,000, the 5,000. And that's why, can you imagine how frustrated Jesus was? Like, I've been with you for like 3 years. You still can't understand what the heck is going on. And I think that's something that we kind of have to look at today too. Do we really understand what's happening? Do we really understand what we're going through right now where people are struggling and falling away? And some seems like, really? Like, you still don't get it? You still don't understand what's happening right now? Right? Where people are like, oh, I don't know. It's, you know, I think some seems like, yeah, we've been through this before. And Jesus scolded them for not understanding the word of what yeast was, right? And he used the example of the feeding of the 4,000 and the 5,000. But he said, no, it's not about food, physical food. It's the teachings of the teachers of the law, right? Those teachings are teaching about the Bible using scripture, but they're putting their own yeast inside. That's why it's no longer the teachings of God. It's the teachings of the Pharisees and Sadducees, which is causing people to rot. And this is when the disciples like, got it. I got it now. The moment we start putting stuff in for our own agenda, the way that we want to do it is the moment we start rotting ourselves and other people's hearts and minds if we share it. And we have to understand is the most important thing is the miracle of the word itself. When it's the pure, unadulterated word that's not put in with all the other different things in our hearts and minds. So what about today? Well, you have to discern really well. Even for myself, right? Like some people might be strong enough also to listen to those things. And, even for myself, if I listen to what someone says, I look very carefully at has their morals and ethics disintegrated where they're no longer kind. They're no longer loving people, but they are hating and going against people. Like that's a huge sign because it's no longer about God. Why? 1 John 4 verse 7 and 8 says, you need to love each other because if you don't love each other, you don't know God because God is love. Which means that if there's an absence of love, there's an absence of God in their life. Right? If there's an absence of love, there's an absence of God. And that's something that we have to think about too, is even when we're going through this tough time right now and we see people coming against us and such, we can't turn to that side also and start rotting ourselves by like hating them and cursing them and stuff. We can't do that. Our goal is to love. Where others, I'm not saying exactly who, but Satan's side is to hate. Our side is to love. And when you look at this story of Jesus feeding the 4,000, 5,000, I love the points that were made. If it's just physical bread, you've only helped them for a couple of hours. Why? A couple of hours later, you're gonna get hungry again. You haven't really done much. But what's the greater miracle? The greater miracle is helping people with the words of God so they live forever. If it was just about giving food, how would it affect us today? It just ends after eating. But if you teach the words of God, you protect people from the lies of the teachers of the law, it protects them. 4,000, 5,000. And when we look at, that story of 4,000, 5,000, that's just the men, which means there was women and children there, which means we're looking at double the number. So instead of like those two together, 4,000, that's 9,000 people. It's probably close to like 20,000 people together that were hearing the words of God so that they would not be harmed by the contradictions that came from the teachers of the law. And even now, I like that point is, even now, the descendants of the teachers of law are here in this time period too. Their teachings and their ideologies are like rotting yeast. And they're rotting other people. And you can kind of even see that in politics, right? People are being rotted by these ideologies and teachings that they're doing in some schools and in the politics. It's making other people kind of become this, these rotting people with rotting minds. And that's why we have to be on guard and we have to cut these things off. There's no point in listening to it. We have to be those that understand, just like it wasn't edible bread at the time of Jesus, it was the bread of the word, the words of life, that whoever ate from those words would live forever. Today's word too, we're listening on Sunday. We are listening to the miracle of bread right now at this time, protecting us from those with rotting hearts and rotting actions. And if we keep listening to it, our hearts begin to rot too. And this is why we have to be proud. Have the pride in this word, right? Have the pride in this word. Like even at this point, well, not many of them talk to me that much anymore, but I haven't heard anything That's like, oh, that's why your word is wrong. They'll just bring up stuff like, oh, and I heard that Sunseem's not the first one to get this word. Oh, and I heard. Like, no, give me something real and substantial. Something real. It's kind of like the accusations. Give me something real. Give me a real audio. Not the audio they have on Netflix. Give me a real one. Or give me a real video. Give me a picture. Give me something else. I need something real. You know, a lot of us, you know, for me, I've been in Providence for 25 years. I spent 21 of my years just running for Providence. But, you know, a lot of us have put our lives on the line until this point right now. And, you know, it really related to me when Sunseem was like, you know, we have put our lives on the line and now our youth has aged away from running for this history. But if you start listening to those people, then what's going to happen to all the stuff you did, all that youth that you had that you ran for, it becomes nothing. Then all your heart and thoughts will rot and you eventually leave the domain of life. And I thought to myself is, yeah, you know, the only thing that's going to take away all the things I did in the past in this history is what I do now. If I leave, if I start rotting in my heart, if I start rotting in my mind, that's what's going to make me leave. Right? And all the things that I've built up until this point in my life will amount to nothing. If we don't do according to the words of life, right, then we begin to rot. And it's like, it's true. Many of, you know, it's so sad for many of us with friends and stuff that used to be here. They've changed, right? And like, for me, it's really sad because these are people that I'm very close to. And it's so sad for me listening to the reasons why they left. It makes no sense to me. Because even the evidence given to me, it's so unconvincing. You know, I like that prayer at pre-dawn when Sunseem said, God repeated these words over and over, the entire pre-dawn. Do not change. Do not change. No matter what, do not change. Do not change. If you change, you will rot. So do not change. Do not change. And that's been the issue, is people changed. People changed. And I think that, you know, we have to look at this. And maybe even in our hearts, if we do some self-reflection on ourselves, we probably might find that, you know, during this difficult time, we might have received some of it and we started to change. And this is why we need to repent. You know, as we're like 50 days in, repent, repent, repent. If you feel guilty, if you feel it in your conscience, we just got to repent it. Just look at what happens when people change, when they were so for the history, running for the history. And then all of a sudden they change. They're like, no, the word is wrong. Oh, everything is wrong here. Oh, it's huge changes. It's like a complete 180. Once you see how far they've changed, right? And they can't even say one good thing. Because there are, like, even if you may not believe in the words, there are some things that are so good that even people who are not in Providence would all agree with, right? They would agree with it. Like, how many people from the former faith would agree with us when we say, hey, you know what? We think that you shouldn't have any sexual relations until you're married. Do you know how many people would be on our side? Do you know how many people would be on our side is like, hey, we need to be people who put God first. You know how many people would be on our side for that? You know, like all these things, there's so many good things, but like, oh, it's all wrong kind of thing. This is why we have to understand is if you're in this history, if you truly believe this is a history of God, then once you have that in mind, like I talk about this on the Sermons in the Sky, maybe it was last week or the week before, is if you really believe it's a history of God, then we're done, right? We're set, which means don't need to listen to anyone else. But if we really believe it's the history of God, if you come from that perspective, that point of view, this is the history of God, you don't need to listen to anything else on the outside. You just don't need to because you already believed, right? It's almost like even in the former faith, once you believe and you know this is the history, I believe in Jesus, he is the Messiah. Even in the former faith, it's not like you're going around checking out other people and all the people that say bad things about Jesus. No one goes out and checks those things out. You don't, because they are certain, they are convicted by their faith. They already believe Jesus is the Messiah. They believe it's the history of God. They're not going out trying to figure out what everyone else is saying. They're not. And that's why it's the same with, it's not any different. They say, oh, well, how can you tell people not to talk, not to listen to anyone else? And the answer is, it really depends if you're convicted or not. Because if you're convicted and you believe it's the history of God, then you don't need to listen to anyone because you already believe. No one's getting mad at a Christian for not listening to the things that are against Jesus. Why? Because they believe. That's their faith. They're convicted by it. They don't need to listen to other stuff. And that's something we have to think about too. It's not a wrong thing. If you believe it, if you believe it's the absolute history of God, that the man of mission is here, it's completely different. If you believe it already, you're convicted by it, why would you have to listen to anyone else? It doesn't make any sense. People have changed. We've seen it over the last 3-4 months. Once were brides. That's probably the last 6 months. They confessed their faith. They believed with all their heart. They gave their life. And they changed. They abandoned the word. They abandoned the one God sent. Now, I'm not talking about people who are still waiting or in the middle. We're talking about people who are completely, they've crossed the line. And you understand now when you think about why Jesus taught so vigilantly to the 5,000 people, to the 4,000 people, teaching them about the teachings and the actions of the teachers of the law so that they wouldn't get rotted by it. It was a miracle of making people full of the words of God so the other words don't come in. Think about it. One point I really loved is hey, after Jesus delivers the word to the 5,000, in John 6:14, they all thought Jesus was a prophet. Now, do you think someone's a prophet because they feed you bread, or do you think someone's a prophet because they preach the words of God? People not say they're a prophet if just they get fed bread. It's when they preach the words, is when they give the prophecies, is when they teach about God. Samaritan woman by the well, exact same thing. They said, this person must be the prophet or must be the Messiah. Why? Because of what he said to me. And this is why for us, especially, I know there's going to be there's going to be people who are convicted. There's people in the middle and there's people on the other side. What I talk to people right now is who is already convicted. You don't need to listen to the other side. If you're convicted and you believe it's the word of God, there's no need. You don't have to listen. Right? It's probably not necessary anyways. Right? For those that are in the middle, I say just wait. Just wait. Just wait. Probably the best thing to do. Just wait. Right? And I think that's something that is probably the healthiest way to do it. If you're stuck in the middle. And that's fine. Everyone has different speeds. Everyone has different times. Everyone has different faiths. Everyone's at different levels. People should go at their own speed. There's no need to push or say, oh, if you're not with us, you're against. Nah, there's no need to. We're here together. And we're here to love each other. And we're here to support each other. Even for me, I don't, even if it's someone that I know is on the other side, I still talk to them, I don't bring stuff up. People make their choice. They make their choice. I'm not going to try to convince them. There's no need to. If they ask me, I might answer something. But if they're asking to try to convince me, I don't bother with it. There's no need. And this is for us too. For those of you who are convicted and you know it's the history of God, there's no need to listen to the other side. It makes no difference. So I'm hoping that all of us will really understand this great, powerful message. Right? It's powerful. Don't listen to the words of people whose words cause rot like yeast. And how will you know? Look at the people, and if they've lost their morals and ethics, if they're no longer good people anymore, if they're rotting in even the basic common courtesies and just treating people well, then you know there's something wrong. Because that's causing people to rot. They're turning for the worse, not for the better. But if people are struggling still to be kinder and better, I have no problems with it. There's nothing rotting there. But you know something's rotting if they've lost all their moral compass and they're doing things in ways like, why would you do it like that? Like, it makes no sense to me sometimes. And this is why we need to hear these words. That's why the second title was awesome. Hear the word. So these words today, understand the meaning of the one who spoke. And I think this is one of the things where the example of Matthew 16, where the disciples on the boat, they couldn't understand what Jesus was saying. They just couldn't. And we have to be those that reach that next level, right? Understand what he says. And we're like, yes, I understand, Jesus, exactly what you're saying, even right now today. All right? So there it is, guys. That is the word study for the Sunday message. Hope it's something that hit you deeply. If you have any comments, go ahead, put it down below. Would love to hear what you guys think about this too. Okay? So let's then move into our second break.
I was a lost one. I found the right one. I found the right one. Yeah, we're looking for the lost ones. I was a lost one. I found the right one. I found the right one. We stay looking for someone to hold when the right one's standing at your door. Open up your heart and say, I'll believe in what you say, and I promise you will gain much more. Yeah, we're looking for the lost ones. I was a lost one. I found the right one. I found the right one. Yeah, we're looking for the lost ones. I was a lost one. I found the right one. I found the right one. 10 years of struggle, 10 years of pain, but I'll finally get to see you no more. Just calling your name, and the ones who wonder who, just open up your eyes. He's waiting for you too. He's not a man in disguise. And the hardest cross to bear, but your heart's not what I'll wear. To think this effort and this love could overcome the dirty stairs. And it's all because of you. Yeah, it's all because of you. Said it's all because of you. Yeah, I need you. Looking for someone to hold when the right one's standing at your door. Open up your heart and say, I believe in what you say, and I promise you will gain much more. Yeah, we're looking for the lost ones. I was a lost one. I found the right one. I found the right one. Yeah, we're looking for the lost ones. I was a lost one. I found the right one. I found the right one.
And let's move into our last section for today. And of course, every single Monday, we have 2G Talks with Eddie Kwan from San Francisco, currently in Hawaii. And this week is going to be his last segment recorded in Hawaii because he'll be coming back to San Francisco. So I hope you guys really enjoy this. Today, Eddie is going to reflect on his final week in Hawaii and also reflect on 1st and 2nd Corinthians. And he really, really hopes that it'll be useful for everyone going into Alpha Day this week and for the second half of this year. All right. So from San Francisco, everyone, please welcome Eddie Kwan with 2G Talks.
Good morning, everyone, all across the world, and welcome to another week's episode of 2G Talks. Today's episode is particularly special for me. Today, I'm recording by myself at the Hawaii Ocean Church, and it's Uh, it's a very important time here, and I think I may have hinted at it in the previous few episodes, but this will be my final recording, at least for this time around, here in the state of Hawaii. And I really have to thank God and the Trinity, as well as to everyone here, and also for everyone listening on this channel too. And for Pastor Sky, for everyone who has supported this time here. And I'm so grateful for everything that I've got to experience while we're here. And so as I was preparing for today's episode, I was really reflecting a lot, because I think in our life of faith, and in my life of faith, God has really allowed me to experience so many different things. But I think the thing that we realize after a while, the more we live too, is that memories and experiences are easily forgettable. Like the moment that you do something, it kind of vanishes, right? The next thing will take place of the thing that you just experienced. And so I was like, I don't want that to happen this time around. So I was really thinking deeply, like, what is it that I can be truly thankful for and remember and keep with me? And the thing I realized is that, the stuff that we collect, like one of the things that in my travels in the last 5 years I thought about is is there like a meaningful souvenir that I can pick up in places? But for one, I've never really been one to hold on to things because, I don't really like clutter. I don't like it if something doesn't have a purpose. And so I was like, okay, I don't really like souvenirs. And I thought about different things. But the reason why I brought it was like, okay, souvenirs don't really last and don't really continue to carry the meaning as before. And I was like, okay, one thing that does substitute souvenirs are photos, because when you refer back to photos and you look at it, it reminds you of the thing that you experienced. And I think this is something that I talked about in last week's episode too. And so that is one thing that I will cherish. But even photos, like we said, like experiences, memories, those things can fade so quickly. And so I was really, really thinking about it. And I was praying, and I realized that the thing that I can take away from Hawaii, and the things that all of us can take away from our experiences, is the change that we experience and the growth that we have gone through. Like the person that we become afterwards, that is how we can best testify for and attest to the things that we've experienced in that time. And so really for Hawaii, that's what I will be remembering, and for these last 6 months too. And one of the things I wanted to talk about today to really express that gratitude is, I don't know actually with what sort of heart that I came here, like what specific thing I really wanted to do and things like that. And in some ways, I really tried to be open-minded while coming here. And it's it's like, to say the least, God has made things far beyond anything that I could have expected. And he has made this time far greater than I could have ever possibly have hoped. And today I was reading through the scriptures, and I was reading through two of Paul's letters, right? First Corinthians, right? The First Corinthians and Second Corinthians too. And so when I was reading through it, I was like, wow, like this letter really struck me. And I think this is something that I really needed to thank God about, that I was thinking about, that I need to repent for, and that I need to ask to happen again. And that I also hope that happens for everyone too, wherever you are. Like one of the things I'm sure you guys have seen lately is that we've been doing the Man Cave episodes, and now we have the Provipuff Girls as well. And it's so good to see that everyone has come together for this too. And so as I was reading through 1 Corinthians, because I'm thinking about this today's segment, and also what things I can leave behind for the Hawaii members too. And when I was reading through this letter, how it began in 1 Corinthians, it really shocked and it moved me. Because Paul confessed, right? And when we think of Paul has always been a very intelligent person. But what he cherished more, and what he wanted more for himself, and what he aspired to do, was not just do things out of his wisdom and out of human wisdom or human eloquence or any of those things, like the knowledge that comes from the world, because those things he relied on before realizing love, and before realizing Jesus' spirit and the will. And afterwards, he relied on a power that came not from, his own understanding of the scripture, of the law, of God's wisdom and of his will, but it came from the soul. It came from the Spirit. It came from the Holy Spirit that taught him what Jesus had done in his life, and what the Holy Son had done, and what God had done from the very beginning. Right? So he mentions that in 1 Corinthians, right, in 1 and 2, and he talks about how he did not come with eloquence or with human wisdom, right? But he came with testimony about God, right? And it came from Christ. And God's wisdom didn't come from the wisdom of the world or from the rulers, like philosophers, like those kinds of things. But it came from God, right? It came from something that people couldn't understand. And it was revealed only to, it was revealed to all the followers, not because we were particularly wise in our own ways, but really only through the grace of God, right? And only through the Spirit. And this is something that I've experienced so much in these past 6 months. I think in the beginning, first few months, there were many times where I felt that it was better to not say anything, right? Not to say things for my own thinking. And whenever those things happen, and it's not that I kept silent, but all the times when some thought, that I had came to mind, I kind of waited, and I kind of put it to the side. And so I absolutely prayed, and I turned to God and the Holy Spirit at each time, and I asked, instead, okay, God, what is it that you would like to say? And Holy Spirit, what is it that you would inspire me to say? And Holy Son, Jesus, right? And something too, what is it that you want me to do? And a lot of times, I think what the answer that sort of came was vastly different from just what I thought too. But I think over the last few months, and as I'm wrapping up things, there are times when I feel compelled to say something that comes from my own heart, right? Something that comes from my own thoughts. And even though to me, I feel that thing welling up in me saying I should say it, or I want to say it. Even as I'm recording this episode 2, I really feel as though this doesn't feel like something that God would want me to say, or that he would need me to say to this person. And so I'm trying to retake on that sort of heart and that attitude where okay, I want to empty myself once again, and maybe not even say anything. And at times that has proven wiser than saying things out loud. Yesterday, the members took me to a luau, one that actually Sunny went to too, and I was really shocked by that. And it's a great big feast with a lot of very, very cool things to immerse yourself in Polynesian culture and things like that too. And so I was so grateful too. And they welcomed up people celebrating their anniversaries. And there was someone who was there for their 50th wedding anniversary. And the master of ceremonies, he was joking around with this couple, and he was asking the man, what's your secret, right? How have you been able to stay together for 50 years? And the husband, he joked around saying, I kept my mouth shut. Right? And it's something that we can joke about, but at times I think even in the world, that is something that we know to be true. And Jesus has told us so many times too that the things that come from our mouths, sometimes from our hearts, those are the things that can defile us in this sort of way. And so I'm really reflecting back on that, but I really want to say to say actually, and it came from 1 Corinthians 2. Because we spoke not from human wisdom, but from the words taught by the Spirit, there's so much that we can boast about. And we can boast not in our own understanding of anything, but everything that we received comes from God. And the miracles that were performed were greater than anything that we could have orchestrated, that I could have orchestrated in any way, or that I could have imposed on these 6 months or on anyone. And so I am really thankful. And as I wrap up these 6 months, I really want to say that I want to take that away from these last 6 months here. And once again, humble myself, bring myself down, and offer myself up to God, and not get consumed by my thinking. And this week is Alpha Day, and it's a new beginning for the second half of this year. As we were reflecting back on the first 6 months here in Hawaii, there were unimaginable things that happened, halfway through and even since then too. But we're not discouraged by those things, but they did happen. And I really can't imagine how things would have been if we hadn't been here in those 6 months, if we hadn't been working together with the Hawaiian members, with everyone online, with all the different churches spread throughout Americas, through the Americas, through Europe, through Australia, through Africa, through all the Asian countries too. And so I really thank God for working in such a miraculous way, so that in so many different ways we were actually shielded from a lot of different harm too. And so with this, I really hope that everyone has a great Alpha Day, this week, and that we too can reflect back on the time. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, I think it's easy to forget the things that we have gone through. But if we remember the person that we have become, then we really gain a lot. And that is a thing that will kind of serve as a testament to what it is that we've gone through. So I really hope to see you guys next week. And once again, I will not be on the island of Oahu next week. But I'll be seeing you guys from back at home in San Francisco. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Not necessarily about going home, but even just about being able to converse with you guys from a very different place once again. So I thank you guys, and I'll catch you guys on another week's episode of 2G Talks.
And thank you so much, Eddie, for another wonderful episode of 2G Talks. And I know that a lot of people are learning and harvesting from your reflections, not just on your last week, but also from 1st and 2nd Corinthians. I hope that everyone, if you have anything you want to add or things that you're inspired by, go ahead, leave a comment for Eddie. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful and awesome first day of the week on this Monday. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm